My name's Rich, welcome back to Me, My Bike and I, and today we're going to carry on with the top end rebuild of my 92 Yamaha Virago XV535 engine. Let's go take a look at these cylinder heads. So I'm going to go start to finish one at a time, right from stripping, inspection, cleaning, reassembling, getting it back on the block and correctly timed, and then we'll start on the front. All I'm trying to do is take it apart, give it a very brief inspection, more importantly a clean, to make sure there's no metal fragments floating around inside. I don't think there will be, to be perfectly honest, because that gallery there, I think it's pretty much one of the only inputs for oil or any debris or anything like that, so I can't imagine anything's gone up there. But you never know. Pulled out quite a lot of rubbish from the crankcases. The only bits that I'm going to replace are the studs here, and I've got new oil seals for each of the exhaust and intake valve stems to fit. So I'm going to start by taking out the camshaft and the rockers, and I don't actually think it matters which way round you do it. The little pin's pointing up, which means it's equivalent of being in top dead centre on the compression stroke, so the cam lobes are away from the rockers, so there's no pressure on the rockers, so everything should just come apart quite easily. 3mm Allen key, and I'll take that out for a second. I am going to bag up all these little bits individually. So if I hold that there and try and turn that anti-clockwise, oh, I think that moved. Yeah. Just going to pop all of this in a bag marked rear cylinder exhaust. Right, and then I'll just go and pop this in a bag marked up rear cylinder intake. Take those off while I'm at it. And these. Right, now let's get to work on the camshaft. Right, my attitude to tools is that every screwdriver is a pry bar, and tools are disposable. So, you know, also think every tool has a hammer end. And the thing is, you get the job done, and sometimes you wreck a tool, and sometimes it will last you a lifetime. But for me, they can be replaced. I do have some that I cherish, especially some of my old, my dad's old things. And I've got some tools that are like 50 or 100 years old, which, going back to the 70s doesn't seem like a long time, but going back to the 1920s or whatever certainly does. So this particular little screwdriver bit is most definitely disposable. I'm hoping to save and salvage this. I think we're probably all good there. I think that moved. Got a feeling one of these bolts is longer than the other. I might be completely wrong, but it was of a certain length. Ooh. And that is of a certain other length. Right, That should just pull out. I bet it doesn't. Ooh. So this is the bushing. You could call it the bearing if you like, for the end of the camshaft there. Right, I just happen to have left the cam pulley bolt in there for whatever reason. I don't know why that's got a number 1 embossed on there, unless that means it's for the number 1 cylinder, and we're on the rear here, which is the number 2 cylinder. Be interesting to see what's on the cam on the front. So the next thing is to come round this side and remove these rocker arm shaft retaining bolts and their sealing washers. Did that turn? Yeah. Go for that. I didn't want to go get my breaker bar out at this stage. Right, so let's take the exhaust side off first. I've done that with my fingers, look. It's a big old chunky monkey, isn't it? Okay, first bolt out, and I spy metallic mayhem. 2 strands of metal. You do realise when you're looking at these things where all the galleries are. There you go. That's the right side one, that's the intake one. I just assumed that these were just shafts that held the rockers in, but these are actually very much like banjo bolts. You can just see the indentation there, and the little oiling hole there. Clearly these are hollow. You've got an oil gallery right there. It just goes down into the head. That there is the rocker shaft itself, and the advice is to screw a slide hammer in and just pull it out enough to free the rockers there. But it's completely smooth bored, so I'm not entirely sure what you're meant to be screwing in to that, unless it means, you know, stick a very slender pulley in there. So what I've discovered is on the intake side anyway, you can just go around the other side, yeah, sorry, we're here, and give it a, just catch it, give it a push, and dear. There you go, out it comes. You can get it out that way. So I don't know what that drama was about. I can't seem to do that on the exhaust side though, but I have discovered that it indeed does have a little thread. So I can pull it, just a little thread in the end. I was missing it, so that's alright. So I'm going to stick a little puller when I find a suitably sized and pitched bolt. Not absolutely convinced this is exactly the right pitch, but it just needs to grab it. Let's try this. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Just needed a bit of persuasion. There you go. If I just followed simple instructions from the start, we wouldn't have a problem, would we? There you go. Yeah, all fine. I couldn't say with absolute certainty how the oil flows around this cylinder head, and I've spent a considerable amount of time observing the oil galleries, and I know where every one of them are, but it's not absolutely clear on the direction of flow for some things and what passes through what and in which direction. So I wouldn't want to give any bum information. So just suffice it to say that oil comes in there straight out of the gallery in the cylinder, and it actually leaves from there down the cam chain tunnel, and that actually goes straight onto the back of the chain itself. And that's actually quite clever, because if you take another look at the engine here, the sight glass for the oil is just there, about 1.5 centimetres below the end of the pin holding the first idler gear. So that's your oil level, and the bottom of the cam chain goes around its own sprocket on the crank there, a good few, maybe 4 inches higher, so it's not getting any other oil feed apart from what's coming back out and returning from the cylinder head. Anywho, which one should we do first? Okay, you win. We'll do the inlet. Let's get the spring compressor. Now I've got 2 spring compressors. I've got this mechanical one and this really cheap sort of fixed one. So this one kind of works on a clamping mechanism, as you can see. It's quite a complicated thing. And this one is just like a good old-fashioned screw type device. And I have to say, I get on with this one a lot better. Can't obviously show you what I'm doing both sides of this, but you can rest assured it's centering in the back of that valve nicely. And actually, I think broke my promise here, haven't I? Because I'm doing the exhaust valve. I promised all you guys I was going to do the intake valve. Well, it can't be helped. I'm forgetful. That's the way I am. There you go. See, that's nicely in the middle. Just need to turn this other end. Then we should be able to see that spring retainer disappear down along with the spring, so that we can pull those keepers out and take the spring and everything out and the valve with it. There you go, look, it's suddenly moved and one of those keepers popped out, so I'm just going to go and get a magnet, see if I can pick that other one out. It should be released sufficiently. There you go. Should see that winding its way back up. And then just lift the valve retainer off. The valve spring retainer and the 2 springs, because there's an inner and an outer. Perfect. Oh, I need 2 magnets, don't I? Otherwise it's... Oh no, there you go. Hey. Valve spring retainer, valves, just need to get that little valve seat out of there. I'm not sure the best way to do this, to be honest. And finally just lift out this valve seat. Comes. That is absolutely everything on the cylinder head, the rear cylinder head removed. Now, one thing you notice is the retainer at the top and the seat at the bottom are very similar, but the retainer is deeper in profile. Okay, so head's all clean, and I took a tiny little bit of carbon off the seat of the valve seat for the exhaust, just encroaching into the valve seat there. So that just brushed away, no problem. And I'm ready to reassemble everything now. I've given all of these exhaust components a bit of a clean over and a blowout with the airline. The head's had a blowout with the airline, and she's all ready to go back together, but I'm not seeing any problems at all. Let me just show you. I have put a kind of a bit of a clean over the top of the surface of the valve there. Listen to this. That's what it should sound like. Little ring to it. If it's a dull thud, you want to lap that back in. But that sounds okay. And I'll just give the little valve stem a wiggle from the back. There's not really any play. I'm just going to put a new crush washer on there. Valve spring seat. Just make sure we get any fluff or nonsense off of it. I don't know why, it's always the case when you go putting anything back together like this, you're always picking out every finest little particle. And it was fine before, it's going to be fine now. Pop those together. The valve retainer on. Very carefully just seat it down, try not to let that compressor slip off the valve retainer. Once we've got it down far enough and we can see we've got room to get the collets into their little groove, and we can slip them in. Probably put them in with a little bit of grease just to hold them in place. I'm going a bit further than I think I need to, because I just need a good bit of room. That seems to have stayed in place this time. Just show you on the intake one, that's how it should look. So there's a ridge on the inside of the collet that sits in the groove at the top of the valve stem, and it should just go slightly further down so we know what we're looking for. Right, so just going to put some grease on it. Give it a bit of stiction. Without a shadow of a doubt, these are the most fiddly things you can put in. They just don't want to... Sorry if you can't see this, but do you know what? I can't see it. I kind of wonder why I even used a magnet there. Didn't do anything. Right. That's on. Just got it stuck on there with a load of what do you call it? Just grease, just multi-purpose grease. They're in. So just gently as you go, decompress the spring. Make sure it doesn't catch the bottom of the collet and knock it back out again. So that's what it should like when it's assembled. You should know that if you took it apart. I'm just going to finish off this side before I start on the intake side, as I've got all the parts to hand and I don't want to mix any of them up. Uh-oh. All done again, this time with the valve stem oil seal in place. Right, well, let's not make that mistake again. Anyway, goes in with a threaded end that way. I don't know what the purpose of these cutouts are, but I really don't know what those cutouts are for. They don't seem to do anything. Okay. New crush washer. Must be a torque spec for that. Just put the valve clearance adjuster bolt in. I'm not going to do any adjustments until the heads are on properly. Don't forget the lock nut. Just put these back in place, ready for the cover. Right, ready to reassemble the intake side now. Given everything a nice clean up. I'm happy with the valve. I've checked the valve stem guide and the valve stem moves nicely in there. There's not too much free play or anything. It seems to be just about as it should be. And I didn't take this head off for any other reason than just to get to the bottom end of the engine, so I'm not too concerned about it. I'm just putting it all back together nicely. So let's get this side finished off and we can move on. Right, valve seat. Valve stem oil seal. Oh, push that on. Get the springs on. Retainer. Just pop the valve through. I think that's gone in and seated straight away. That's good. Let's pop the other one in. There you go, I think that's in. Right, well, that's the hard bit done anyway. Good, good. It's a bit unexpected actually not having a torque spec for this bolt, but I can always give these a bit more of a nip up when the head's seated on the engine. Okay, put a bit of my cams as well. Okay, and yeah, so pin up. Because we want to make sure it's roughly in the right position. So with the pin up like that, that just means that it's not going to be putting any pressure on the not going to be putting any pressure. It's not going to foul on the rockers as I slide it in. That's why you put it into the sort of top dead center on the compression stroke when you disassemble it, because that means of course the valves are closed, and if the valves are closed there's no pressure on these, and if there's no pressure on those, it means the rockers are away from the lobes and it's got freedom to move. So if that was in a different position, of course, you wouldn't get those lobes past the rockers. It'd just go clunk. Make sure that's right in. And so that bit there, it's a two-parter. That piece there just sits in there and retains it, and then that bit's a tab washer. In fact, I did say I'd do this. I'm just going to go and bash that straight. We'll just stick them in there to give them a home. I was fearful of stripping an alley thread. That's fine. Right. That'll do. Right, just going to pop the guide rail in. Oh crikey, it should say up. Yeah, there's a little arrow pointing up, and it's got to be that way. So, not really that way, is it? So, let's make sure that seats. The good thing about these is they have absolutely no rotational symmetry, so you can't go wrong with them. Just need to let that through there, and then I just need to unhook this chain so I can let that through as well, plus the tensioner bar. And there you go, she's down. Let's just hook that back up for a minute. The torque spec for this is 10 Newton meters. That's just the single sort of barrel bolt. It doesn't have one on that side. I've mentioned this already. Weirdly, I don't know why you. I mean, this is head. Why do you need a barrel bolt there? Valve's looking all nice. Let's see if I can get it. Do this without walloping the surface of the cylinder. Right, so that can go through there. Something's in the way. Maybe need the rubber persuader. That is just going to be dowels stopping that from going on, as they do stop them from coming off. Yeah, tease it round. Right, so what we're going to do is not drop the bolt down the tunnel. Fiddly undertaking of putting the cam sprocket on. So I think you can stick it on there easy enough. Getting the chain on, that's the pain of it. I might have to consult YouTube, friends. Well, I don't know, in a minute they might be consulting me. I think they will be. Right, so that's not facing upwards anyway. Should be, there you go, now it is. Okay, gonna torque the cylinder head down now. The studs have nuts on each, and you've got two brackets on either side, which is the forms the engine mounting brackets and the side cover brackets as well. And you've also got a nut and a washer that go down into the spark plug well. And then over on this side, if you can see it, you've got the two little holes there that the bolts go down into that side. So you've got 4 up here, 1 down there, 2 here, 7 in total, and that one there is just the access to the actual cylinder bolt itself. That single one I keep harping on about. Anyway, they're not particularly high torque, so it should be relatively simple. I've got all the stuff over here, that's the hardware. So let's get that on. Right, I've inserted the nut into the socket with a bit of grease just to hold it while I poke it down the arm. Just to get it started. Still down there. Make sure it's not going to ski with. It's quite an awkward job actually because I'm really short and this is so bracket on, good old chunky washer. Not lubricating these studs or anything like that. That actually that's like it's a sort of a captive thread, if you like, into a little box that's been welded on the back so that it can actually move left and right. So you can, so it's actually got a good bit of little play in there to allow the fitting of the engine. Very clever. Didn't notice that before. Spin this round. You definitely need a little bit of a see into before I pop those back. That's better. Happy to pop those back in. Right, so these need 35 Newton meters. These need 20, and the one down there needs 20. And no doubt I'll have to give them a few turns to see them because you can still see the cylinder head's not quite bedded down. That's literally just, as I said, finding a seat. So I realise you probably can't see down this spark plug well because it's just my LED light is failing me this evening. Let's just give this one a... There you go, good. Yep. Thank God it's saying I've had enough. There you go. Okay, head's on, that's all good. Just need to get all this timed up now. Does of course mean I'm going to have to take the sprocket back off and actually move it, reposition it in the chain again, because that's all going to be out of whack when I turn the crank, unfortunately. So, but it was, kept it all where it was meant to be while I was putting the head on anyway, so that's all fine. I've cleaned the stator cover ready to go on, and as you can see I've also removed the stator itself, which I had to do to clean the cover. So I'm not showing you any of that at this stage because it was just a real palaver, and you've got 3 bolts there holding the stator in and 3 bolts there which hold the pulsar coil and wiring harness and stuff like that, and I think 5 out of the 6 were an absolute nightmare to get out. I had to use a cutting wheel, grinder, welder, all kinds of nonsense, and I've tested the stator, so I've done some damage to it getting it out. It's not good anyway. There's no continuity for at least one of the coils, and I've ordered a new one. So anyway, I shall save that for the next video, because that was quite a bit of watching in its own right. So also gave me a really good opportunity to get right in and clean it. I couldn't just leave it. It needed to be cleaned. It was full of grit and dirt and all kinds of stuff, and I couldn't put this onto a fully clean rebuilt engine. So, and it was good that I managed to completely clean out the oil sight glass as well, because that was all carboned and carbonised, and you couldn't see through it. So that's all good now. Used a bit of Mr. Muscle oven cleaner on that. Anyway, let's pop this back on the engine, and then we can start to time up this rear cylinder. Right, shouldn't have any of the usual nonsense in wrestling a stator cover on and off, obviously, because there's nothing for the magnet to grab, so that should be nice and easy. Got one dowel there which will slot into there, and you've got a dowel up here which will slot into there, and that should hold it pretty sort of well without it moving. We shouldn't need to put any bolts in. Okay, so some time ago I made these 2 little like paddles. They would have had a spiky bit on the end. These are just essentially wood hole boring drill bits that I ground off that fit these side covers perfectly. You get new ones of these for sort of 20 quid, but hardly worth it. So I'm going to take the cam sprocket off just so we don't turn the cam shaft, because that is in the right position. All the valves are closed, so it's in compression stroke, in other words. I'll just take the sprocket out and try not to lose the chain. Quite a fiddle, isn't it? Right, slip that over there. Right, so while I turn the end of the crank there, I'm going to be watching to see the little line by the T mark appear by the notch in the window there, just there, and I'll just put my finger through the chain at the top so that can kind of rotate without dropping. The only thing I might have a problem with is the other cylinder, because whilst I'm turning that crank, I'll have one finger through that chain to make sure it rotates and doesn't drop down or fall off the sprocket. The rear one's going to try and turn as well, which will be a problem because that barrel's loose and there's no head on there torqued down. That might rock a little bit and it might sort of grab the piston. So I'll just have to keep stopping and giving things a bit of a tap and a readjustment as I go, really. Okay, and at this stage, it doesn't matter if you turn it clockwise or anti-clockwise. So I can go back if I need to. Just bring in a little bit closer. I think I just went in round and missed it. So there you go. It's lined up as best as humanly possible. About it. Right, still a teeny bit fiddly this. Now, obviously I've got to get that dowel and that mark lined up. Tricky bit is that I could do that now, and then when I put the tensioner in, it'll pull it that way slightly, so I kind of countered it a little bit to start. Saves putting it on there then having to take it off again. Anyway, this can be a tad fiddly, so see what I mean? Right, and you've got a hooked pick on it. That's best way of getting it out. So anyway, let's oh, there you go. Right, so let's turn that ever so slightly. Right, there you go. So when I put my finger through the tensioner, so you're meant to turn it all the way clockwise as if there's no, to take all the slack out, and then put your finger on the tensioner. So essentially that's about as lined up as you could possibly be. So that went first time, that's alright. Good. Just get it started. Right, oil baffle plate goes concave facing out. I'm not sure what the two little features are there. They don't seem to have to line up with anything, and there's no locking tabs or anything like that, so I think I've shown you this before actually. Copper washer, proper copper, not copper coated steel, but a proper copper washer. Jam it in the primary drive gear on the back, and that'll hold that engine while I torque that camshaft sprocket bolt up. Let's just literally lay it in there. Should do the job. Just put a bit of wire on it so if it drops down I can pull it out. Right, 55 Newton meters, so not a great deal, but just do it from the crank on the other side. It's not going to undo anything, it's only a fraction of a degree. Fraction more. That's how you reset it. You just pull that back and then drive it back in, and that's it. Whoops. Drop a bit of oil in, I think. Right, tensioner facing upwards, as in the mechanism that adjusts it, and new gasket. Slot that on. I've kind of pre-cleaned these bolts. Right, gasket moved. I'm guessing the tensioner bolts are probably 10 or 12 Newton meters. I'm not sure. I'll go and check, but that's all it's going to be. Yeah, 12 Newton meters. So they do actually make torque wrenches that go down to that sort of number, but it's nothing much more than just a nipping it up arrangement. So that will do. Just do it evenly as you would with any set of bolts. Keep an eye on them. Put the spring in, and the new crush washer, and guess that's going to be the tricky bit, because you've got to get a bit of force on it and get a bite on the bolt. So let's give that a try. Probably should have gone and got myself a suitably sized open-ended spanner before I started this, shouldn't I? I think I've done it. There you go. 19mm. So all cleaned and ready to reassemble. So on the front cylinder, that would be job done, and just bolt it on the rear cylinder. Just a tiny bit more work, not forgetting to put the extra gasket on. Don't quite understand why you need that on the rear, not on the front, but others that I've spoke to that are at the same sort of stage with their engines have observed the same, so it's definitely not missing, it's standard. Do just make sure that little pin's located in there, by the way, because I didn't. Then it will seat properly. Okay. Get a bolt in, get it started. There you go, make sure it seats in. I think these are 10 Newton meters, by the way. I'm not looking it up, but that's roughly what they are. There you go. That's the rear cylinder done, aside from tappet adjustment. Well, that's the rear cylinder head all finished, all bar the valve clearances, which I will leave until I've done the front cylinder head. So what I'm going to do now is go and strip that down, clean it, inspect it, reassemble it, get it back on the block, torque it down, do all the final finishing bits. Not forgetting you haven't got to worry about things like oil baffle plates and multiple O-rings and gaskets and stuff like that. But it's exactly the same apart from that, so there's literally no point in showing it. So I will pick back up with you in a minute when I come to do the timing of the front, and the only subtle difference is that you're looking for a different timing mark, and the whole process is a lot simpler because you've got the rear cylinder head on already, so you haven't got to worry about the cam chain on there snagging up or anything like that. So you just need fewer hands. Anyway, I'm going to go and get on with that, and I shall see you in a moment. And there you have it, front cylinder head stripped, cleaned, inspected, reassembled on the block, torqued down, and all the engine mounting brackets fitted, ready to be timed. Right, so rear cylinder, top dead centre on compression stroke. I know it's in the right stroke because I've had the cam cover off. So I'm going to get my ratchet on there and try not to shoot past my mark. I'm just holding the cam chain up in my left hand, and as everything's buttoned up, we shouldn't have anything snagging. Should be coming up to this mark fairly soon, I think. It's quite difficult not to shoot past it sometimes. There we are. I'll just give that an extra little turn. Wiggle it back. So it's quite straightforward. When we timed the rear cylinder, we just got the T mark at top dead centre. Don't worry if it's compression, it doesn't know. You set the cam position and you disconnect it all up. When you do the front, you need to move it to the line without any markings by it, and just go straight from the T to the line. So that's a 285-degree rotation clockwise, and then that will line the TDC on compression so that it fires at the correct time relative to when the rear cylinder's firing. So that's all in the right position. The little dowel there is now in the right position. We just need to put the sprocket on. Right, just get the little dot there, which is in line with the slot for the dowel anyway, but gives you a better indicator. Yeah, that's in line. I just need to move that cam clockwise a tad. See if I can rotate that with my finger. Yeah. Perfect. When things start getting old, they're not always going to line up properly. And the cam chain on here and all the markings seem pretty good. Trick, I'm going to actually slot that down in there where the cam chain meets the sprocket to lock that up. Get this torqued up. .55 Newton meters from memory, but I'll check it. Anyway, if I just turn the engine clockwise a tad, I should be able to release that the correct way. I've gone through quite a lot of these doing this engine rebuild. Probably could have got away with using the old O-ring, but if you've got it, you might as well use it. Well, that's the top end of the engine completely rebuilt now. Just a few little finishing off jobs to do. Need to set the valve clearances, of course. I'm waiting for a new stator to arrive because I took the old stator out because I really needed to clean out that side cover as I'd completely stripped and cleaned the engine. That was by no means any exception and it needed doing. and the stator did sustain some damage getting it out. I don't think it would have been fully functioning anyway. I tested the coils and one of them had no continuity, and the others were out of range, so I guess it needed replacing. But the 3 bolts that were holding it in, that were retaining it, and the separate 3 bolts that were retaining the wiring harness and the pulsar coil were just very, very difficult to remove. I had to resort to grinding, cutting, welding, usual stuff on stuck bolts, and it made a bit of a mess. So I didn't really show any of that during this particular section of the rebuild, so I will upload all that footage in the next video. And then really it's just a few ancillaries such as the starter motor, the neutral switch, middle gear, final drive, that kind of thing, oil filter, cover, a few bits and bobs, clutch side. That's really it. It's just bolting the last few bits on really. So we'll crack on with that after I've just uploaded a short video about the work I've done on the stator side cover. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, of course, please do leave a comment. I will get back to you. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and I will see you on the next video.